Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome listeners, you're on Big Little Small Talk with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. Today I'm interviewing someone who's got an extensive list of achievements. Her name's Alyce Nelligan, sometimes known as Speedy. We're going to know why she's called Speedy at some time during this interview, but I'll just say welcome and thank you for making time for me, Alyce.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, Megan. I'm chuffed that you asked me on your podcast.
Oh, well, I think that you've done a lot of interviews, you've done a lot of things in your life, but I want to start with the most recent incident that's happened to you. Now, the listeners won't know unless they know you personally, but you're in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. Something happened to you and your family just recently. Can you tell me what it was?
Yes, unfortunately, my car was stolen, but the issue was it had my wheelchair in the boot and all of my equipment that I need to travel in the car. So having that car taken meant that I was housebound.
What happened? I know that I saw it on Facebook and it had been shared, 300 and something or other times. So someone came, stole the car out of the driveway.
Yes.
And took off with it.
Yep.
And you came out in the morning, was it?
No, we actually heard them get in the car. And so we raced to the front door and saw them driving off. And I can't tell you, my heart just sank.
And so how long was it between when that happened and when you knew the fate of the car? Tell what happened. Was the wheelchair recovered or? Yeah,
I think it was about over 2 weeks it took for the car to be located. They actually found it abandoned on the side of the road. The criminals had used it to burn out another car and my car had died, and so they just left it there. So we were very, very fortunate that it just was abandoned. And the police were able to recover it. But when we got it back, nothing was in it. But
not the wheelchair or anything?
No, not even my disability parking permit. We had other people's things in our car, like tools. It's just like, oh my goodness, this isn't mine. Like, yeah, very interesting times.
I don't need any tools, but I sure need my wheelchair. So what happened then?
The wheelchair was recovered in Oakey by the Oakey police. So we were very, very lucky, and they brought it straight back to me as soon as they recovered it.
So was it just on the side of the road, or was it in someone's house? Or
they knew where it was, right. So they were able to get it.
All right. So, Alyce, have you always been in a wheelchair?
Yes. So I never made my milestones, and so I never crawled or walked. And so I had a lot of physio as a young child to see just where my limit would be. And I was able to pedal a little trike. So when I went off to primary school, that's how I went off to school, which was pretty different for back then. But then they decided it might be easier for me to be able to get around school and our community in a chair. So I got my first chair at 5 years old.
When were your parents aware that something was going on?
I think probably around 6 to 8 months, when I just wasn't making those normal milestones like sitting up, swallowing food easily. I wasn't pulling myself up to go around furniture. So it was becoming apparent that something just wasn't quite right.
Right, and what was the diagnosis then?
Well, it took a long time and a lot of testing. I actually had muscle biopsy, which is a piece of actual muscle cut out of your arm and examined under a microscope. And so they found some like mitochondrial difference in the muscle structure, but not like a huge amount. So they decided it was either centre core myopathy or mini core myopathy, which are extremely rare genetic disabilities. But that's about all that's known about it. So it just means I'm generally weak. Some people with my disease walk, and some people use a wheelchair.
Had you older brothers and sisters?
No, I'm the oldest, and the only child of that marriage. My parents were told it was probably good not to have any more children.
Right.
Yeah.
And have you since found out that that's probably not true, or?
Well, I guess doctors can be a bit fatalist sometimes. You know, they think that, oh my goodness, you could have another child that has a disability, but in reality the odds are about 50-50. So you could have 4 kids without it, but you could have 4 kids with it. You just don't know. It's a lottery.
So I do want to tell the listeners about your, some of the things. So you call yourself a disability advocate.
Yes.
Yeah. You're also a political activist.
Yes.
You're a model.
Yes.
You're a mum.
Yes.
You have a partner.
Mm-hmm.
But most importantly, why are you called Speedy?
I love it. I love it. I was in year 9 at high school, and our PE teacher decided that I was the speediest in the class, and the name has stuck. There are people that have known me my entire life and don't ever call me Alyce. You know, it's become a bit of an identity.
Yeah, it's cute. Tell me about your identity as a disability advocate, and I mean the whole sort of. You and I saw each other the other day at the Business Disability Awards, which is an amazing organisation that gives awards to businesses that employ people with disability, and I think you have been involved in that in some capacity. Have you been an award winner?
No, I haven't. Been a nominee a couple of times. Yeah.
So this. People say, "Oh, I don't see your disability anymore, Alyce." What does that feel like?
Look, it's something I straight away like to challenge, because it's wonderful that people want to accept me and people like me as a whole person, and that's beautiful. But if you don't see my disability, you're not seeing a huge part of my identity and all of the challenges that come with that. It's like saying that you don't see someone's race or you don't see someone's gender. If you don't look at that, you're not examining the whole picture. And I think it's really critical that we acknowledge it but also celebrate it.
So people who say that to you, thinking that it's kind of a nice thing to say, that's almost sort of wiping away part of your identity as well, is it?
That's right, yeah.
And what are the changes that you've seen for people with disability? Is it around the language, or is it around access, and what are the irritating things that people do and don't do?
I think, look, when I went to go to school, I was denied schooling at first. So we have come a long way since the early 1990s, because we still had a very segregated society. I'm really the first generation, and very lucky, I know it, that the first generation of disabled people to ever get a proper mainstream education and have opportunities. And if we think to the generation before me, they were still in institutions. So this is really new for society, and we're still breaking down that stigma. So I think we've come a long way in education, in access. I think our communities are getting more accessible, which is amazing. Businesses are starting to realise, hey, you actually want to come here, you want to eat here, you want to shop here. We're starting to change that, which is really, really good, But in terms of attitudes towards us, I think we still have a long way to go. So you'd be amazed at some of the things that happen to me in public.
Tell me about some of those things.
People will come up and pat me on the head like I'm, a young child. They will talk to you loudly because they think that you're deaf or hard of hearing, or that you might have an intellectual disability as well, which, you might, but don't talk to us like we're silly. I've had people refuse to serve me. A lot of people will speak to your carer or your partner or your parents and not speak to you. And it's like, excuse me, I'm the one with the credit card. You can serve me. So there's still, we can be very invisible in public, and that's why I'm so out and proud and brightly coloured, because I want to break down those stigmas, so people actually understand us and look at us as a whole person.
Yeah, I want to talk about your fashion because it's wonderful, and you dressed very brightly in pink today, and I don't know whether that's anything to do with the Barbie movie being released, but we'll go there in a minute, because it is a big part of your identity, I know. When people are talking to you and they're standing up, Do you prefer them to sit down or crouch down, or what's the protocol there?
I think everyone is different. In this chair, I'm very short, so I get a very sore neck looking up at the world. So I do like people to hop down at my level. But if I'm in my other chair, which is higher, you don't have to crouch with me. So I think it's very dependent on your mobility aid, and it's very dependent on your relationship. You know, if it's a true friend, they'll probably just plonk on the side of my wheelchair. You know, so there's different levels there. But I think getting down to someone's eye level is polite, you know, so that we can have a genuine interaction.
Yeah. Over the years, have you had to have much treatment, or you know, what's the sort of the medical world of being in a wheelchair? You know, even with sort of, you don't call them bed sores, but like what do you call them? Pressure sores. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Look, I think the medical model has a very specific idea about disability, and that's fixing it. And we've sort of moved away from that as a community. We understand that it's not something that needs to be, pardon me, necessarily fixed. If someone wants that, fine. But I spent an awful lot of my life having testing, having treatments, having surgeries, having all of these different things, because doctors just have that view to get you the best that you know, you can be, which is very admirable, but sometimes it becomes a detriment. You know, I had a lot of physical therapy, I had a lot of surgery, very painful surgeries, like I had the adductors in my hips cut, muscles in my thighs cut. You know, I've had all of these procedures, lots of casting, lots of being stretched. I had to have scoliosis surgery, but that's quite common in people with muscle disease, because your muscles just can't hold it up. Something like that's necessary, but having all these other things and intensive rehab, when, you know, if you can just actually accept that I'm disabled, I can get around a lot better in a wheelchair. If I had walked, I probably would have only ever shuffled a couple of feet and then not actually been able to get around my community. See? So it's kind of like I've been through a lot and a lot of painful things, and have a lot of medical trauma, because everything's just about fixing us. So, and because you're a child and your parents are told this is what's best, and they're going to want to do what's best, quite often we have surgeries that we often later regret.
And when you say people are trying to fix you, what are they trying to do? What's the ultimate goal? Is it to get someone walking? Is it?
And that was very much the narrative when we were kids. So if you think back, and I'm trigger warning here for a slur, but the Spastic Centre, which then became the Cerebral Palsy League, that's all they did, was just rehabilitation to get you to walk. The goal was to normalise everyone, and I understand where that comes from, but you know, it's not really person-centred. It's not thinking about, well, is this helpful for us? Is this painful? Is this, you know, what are the personal goals here? You know, the goal was always just to fix us, basically. Yeah.
Can you tell me the story about when the first day of school, and your parents' decision to put you into mainstream school?
Oh, absolutely. This is probably one of the funniest stories, I think. My parents just went to enrol me in the local public school, and the principal refused. He said the only place for someone like Alyce is at the special school. Now, my parents took offence to this. They said, look, she's absolutely capable of getting a mainstream education. You know, she's smart, she deserves to be here. He just said absolutely not. So my parents and my grandparents took on New South Wales education back then, and won, and the principal had to take me. But they renovated the school. So picture this, we're there with the paper, just like the Chronicle would be if it was here. We've got the politicians, we've got the ribbon, you know, everybody's smiling, happy. We're cutting the ribbon on the ramp, and I'll never forget my mother's face. There was a step at the bottom of every single ramp at the school. So I'd already had a delayed education because they hadn't let me go. And then when I went to go, I couldn't go until they redid all of the renovations.
And was that, where are we talking about? Is this in Goolagong?
Cowra.
Cowra, okay.
That was the bigger school in the town near us. Yeah.
And what type of work were your parents doing?
My mum worked at the Edgels factory, and my dad was a farmer.
And had they had ever any experience in either of their families with someone with a disability?
No, none at all. So very much uncharted territory, and the fact that they stood up for me so much is just incredible when they'd never dealt with it before.
Were they just sort of feisty type of people and they said, no, we're not going to take that, we're not going to have her going to the special school, she needs to go to mainstream school? They really believed it then?
They're very feisty people, yes. I don't know where I get my attitude from.
That's right. Sometimes, what's that saying? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Just remind the listeners that they're on Big Little Small Talk, and we're talking to Alyce Nelligan, who, among other things, is a disability advocate because she herself has a disability and is in a wheelchair. Alyce, I just want to talk about your parents a little bit more. You said that you were the only child of that marriage. Did they then go on to get married to other people?
Yeah.
Do you think that the sort of stress of what was happening in their lives with you, do you think that contributed to the breakdown of their marriage?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the statistics are very clear that the majority of marriages of children with a severe disability break up. You know, the stress and the strain. And often I think people blame themselves or each other for the disability, which is incredibly sad. I think people get a lot of guilt about having a child that has a disability, which you wish that you could be the adult and speak to them when you're a child and say, look how I turned out, there's nothing for you to fear. You know, it must be very hard. I don't have that experience. My daughter is able-bodied and boring, to be honest. You know, she's very healthy. So yeah, look, it did take a lot of a toll on them, and my mum remarried and had more children, and they're both able-bodied. So yeah.
So is the reason, is it a genetic position? Is that what it was, or was it the combination of your parents' genes, or is that what they say?
Well, it's very unknown because you can be a carrier, obviously, and if two people are carriers, they can pass it down. My parents aren't, and so they wonder if I'm just a genetic abnormality. You can have a child just in utero, the gene just doesn't work properly, and that happens, you know. They call it a sporadic case, and so they think it's very likely that I was sporadic. My dad's, they thought was positive, but it wasn't, and my mum's was unclear. So it's not an exact science. It can be, genetics is quite complex.
Yeah. So as an activist, what sort of things do you do, literally, you know?
Well, I came out of uni with the view of I'm going to challenge how society sees people with disability. I actually wrote a show for my third year performance and sold out the little theatre at USQ. And the content was, it was the Speedy Show, don't laugh. That's what everyone called it. It wasn't its real name. And in that, I showed the reality of life as a disabled person. And then I burst out into the world, and I worked with Dr. Sharon Boyce and Tony Mitchell. You would know Tony, and we did workshops in schools breaking down the stigma of how people see disabled people, and so I did that for 11 years while then diving into politics and talking about housing and talking about the NDIS and Centrelink, and you know, just my whole goal is to change how people see us, but also change the material conditions that we live with, because people with disabilities are the most disadvantaged group probably in Australian society today, because they don't have equitable access to the things that they need. So that's and I might go to a conference, or I might go to something like the awards launched the other day, you know, a lot of networking and talking to NGOs. I'm working with YWCA Australia right now. We're running peer networking events to teach women with disabilities and non-binary people how to find pathways into employment and be empowered to be able to find employment. So it's really just fighting to make it better for other people with disabilities. That's what I've been doing. As
you do more and more work and get more and more sort of well known, you just keep getting extra, you get jobs, do you?
Yeah.
Do you get paid jobs? They pay you to do things? Yeah?
Some jobs, absolutely. Yeah. It depends. If it's a government funded program, you can get paid, but some things are for charity, and I'm willing to, drop my fee because I think sometimes the work is more important. But hey, it's a bit like being a starving artist. Sometimes you got to eat, right? it's a fine balance, but we're trying to promote more and more to pay your people that come in and teach your organisations. You should be paying them for that work. Yeah.
Sure. Well, how did you end up going to USQ? Did the family... So you went to the primary school and they changed the everything except for the step at the bottom of the ramp. And you went through that same primary school, did you? Or?
My mum ended up moving up to Queensland, and so I came up here for a little bit and then went back to New South Wales for high school. And then I was sort of tossing up what I was going to do career-wise, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to try uni. And so I moved back to Queensland, did my year 11 and 12 up here, and then fortunately, thank goodness, got accepted into USQ. So it was a bit of a, what would you say, not a linear trajectory, but I decided that I really wanted to try and get a degree and see where life would take me.
And what degree did you end up doing?
I started out doing teaching, believe it or not, thinking that having a person with a disability in the education sector could be really, really helpful. I wanted to help other people like me, you know, make school more accessible. But I ended up swapping out to an arts degree and focusing totally on like changing the way that people see people with disabilities. I did a lot of research into disability. I have a Bachelor of Creative Arts in theatre and literature, so that I can write about the experience of disability, which I still do a little bit of writing now.
So let's talk about your role models. You know, do you see people in movies, on TV, working in shops with, well, in your case, say a wheelchair, but other disabilities as well? Like, do you feel that you're underrepresented?
Absolutely. You've really hit the nail on the head there. Representation is so important. People call it, you know, being woke, or say it's token and all this sort of rubbish. But when I was a little girl, I'd never seen a woman with a disability on the TV. You didn't see her in Dolly magazine. You never saw her in, you know, movies. There was no one working anywhere like me. So what was I supposed to think for my future when I hadn't seen anyone that looked like me at all anywhere? There wasn't even Wheelchair Barbie when I know. Now I have one. Actually, we have two. People buy them for me. You know, and so I never saw myself. And that really affected me. I wasn't outgoing like I am now. I didn't have those dreams. I didn't have those confidence. But thankfully, I was sort of turning into an adult when that constellation of disabled people were really breaking out in the media. So the beautiful Stella Young. I credit Stella with giving me that confidence, because she was out, she was disabled, she was unapologetic. She said, this is how it is for us. She was so brave. And she said, you get proud by practicing. Get proud by practicing. And so I took on that mantra and I did that work, as many of our peers did. And Stella really paved that path, because I think we wouldn't have the representation that we do with people like Carly Finlay, Eliza Hall, you know, all these Naz Campella that works at ABC. You know, we wouldn't have all these incredible people with these public profiles if Stella hadn't banged down that door and got us out there and into this space, you know, because no one heard from us. Our voices were silent. And so now, thank goodness, when little girls go out into the world in their wheelchair or with any type of disability, they're seeing people just like them, which is amazing.
And yet still things can happen, like when you went to get your identification. Tell that story to the listeners if you could.
Absolutely. I went off to the Department of Transport and Main Roads and had my ID photo taken. And when I got the card in the mail, it was just the top half of my head. No one had actually indicated to me that, hey, we can't actually take a photo of your face. So this is a big thing, you know, inaccessible infrastructure. When you haven't even got a camera or a chair at the main roads, you know, to get a picture of someone that's using a mobility aid, we don't have an accessible society. So thankfully I put it online and it went a little bit viral, and the media got a hold of it, and we got Main Roads to apologise and replace it, and they've promised me they're going to, you know, fix up their infrastructure to make it accessible. And I think I can't be the first person that just got half a head And I had so many advocates reach out to me on Twitter and say, oh, thank you for making a fuss. And I think, my goodness, we just can't fight every battle, you know, and people just end up accepting it because they don't want to fight another day, you know. And so I'm really glad that I did get cross about that one, because now it's going to be better for other people.
And like everything, isn't it? You know, you got to pick your battles, but somehow or other, I think, Alyce, you do things in a way that doesn't get people offside and say, you know, but literally to send you that identification with half of your face missing.
Isn't it a brilliant photo? I wish your listeners could see.
Yeah, you might have to go online and see the photo that the Main Road sent to Alyce. Let's talk about your political career. How did that start?
Well, it's funny, you know, I was only reflecting the other day. I think I might be a little bit of a hack. I actually started working back for the Toowoomba Youth Council under Di Thorley when I was in school, and I really enjoyed that work, and it really taught me a lot about community and serving your community and leadership. And then I went off to uni and didn't think much about it. And then as society kind of, I'll be frank, went downhill a bit for the rights of people with disabilities, you know, we'd had some pretty terrible things happen, you know, with the DSP. Over 70% of participants that apply for it now are rejected.
So tell me what that means. What is the DSP?
Oh, the disability support pension.
Right. So what's the statistic again? Over
70% of applications for the disability support pension are rejected. So there's been a lot of punitive measures in welfare in the last couple of decades, and so that spurred me into, what can I do? What can I do about this? And I joined up the Greens, purely based on their welfare policies for people with disabilities, for their accessible housing and the NDIS, and decided to dig in and see what I can do. And thankfully they've been really supportive, and I've actually run as a candidate multiple times, and I ran for the Senate last year in the federal election.
And how did that go?
Okay.
You're still here.
I'm still here, yeah. No, it was a wonderful opportunity. I got to work with Jordan Steele John, talking about disability and disability rights and disability justice, and you can't put a price on that. That was just wonderful.
I remember seeing you doing a press conference. I think you were running in the state election in 2020, in October 2020, and you were there with Larissa Waters. I was going to say Larissa White. Larissa Waters, and you know, was that sort of a proud moment? Tell us about some of the really proud moments that you've had.
Yeah, getting to work alongside people like Larissa and Penny Allman-Payne. You know, it's a very pinch me moment. Getting to go and meet Jordan Steele John. You know, you just think, wow, how humble it is to be around such amazing, incredible people that willingly give their time to mentor you. Getting to meet Bill Shorten and chat to him about the NDIS last year, that's definitely up there. I don't often get nervous around pollies, as you know. We're all friends here. But I even got a little bit nervous. I said to Bill, my gosh, I'm talking to the person that came up with the NDIS. He said, don't be silly. Don't be nervous. You know, that was a very, very proud moment.
He didn't put a little zinger in there that went wrong or anything like that.
No.
You know, Bill's famous for his zingers.
So
tell me about the NDIS. How do you feel about it, and what are your views on the NDIS?
Oh, how long have we got? Look, I'll be very honest. It has its absolute benefits, you know, getting people into the community, getting them socially activated, helping people find employment. It absolutely has such good parts of it, but there are parts of it that fundamentally don't serve people with disabilities. You know, constantly having to prove your level of impairment, constantly having to prove the support that you need, constantly having to deal with them, and really, you just need to have the support set up so that it works for you, so that you can have a quality of life. You know, it really is there. Bill and I actually spoke about this. It's there to give people agency. Okay, that's what it can do. And if we're going to make that work, we've got to get it right. And structurally, right now, it's not working as it should. Parts of it do, parts of it don't. We really need to work on those internal processes and make it something that's, you know, supportive if you talk to people with disabilities, they'll often say that it's very stressful, very demoralising, very distressing experience. We don't want it to be like that. We want people to engage with it safely, freely, and feel like it's helping them. And right now, it's running a bit too much like an insurance scheme and not enough like a support system for the most vulnerable in our community. So we've got some work to do.
Would you ever try and get into some sort of policy type area where you're writing policy for people with disability?
Well, fortunately, I get to do that with the Greens.
Yeah.
I'm a member of our Queensland Campaign Committee. We are the ones that come up with our campaign ideas, and we also, as a party as a whole, work on our policy with a review every year, and so I get to be a part of that. And so obviously what we write and what Labor writes, it eventually comes together to form some sort of a policy where we're all giving a bit, taking a bit. So I know that I am making, a small difference there.
Is the ambition to still try and become some sort of Member of Parliament, do you think? Whether at a state or a federal level?
I'd love to, yeah. I'm just a bit tired after COVID. The last couple of years have really taken my zing away. Being basically housebound, it's a lot. It's been a lot. But I'm hoping that one day, yes, I'd love to be able to represent the people of Australia that have a disability well, and federal politics is my passion. So I'd love to serve in the federal space and really just champion people with disabilities everywhere. It would be a dream.
I'll just remind the listeners you're on Big Little Small Talk with Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and Alyce Nelligan, who is now going to tell me about being a model. Tell me about, I know that you love fashion.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a big part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And recently you were featured at Grand Central.
Yes, I was.
One modelling gig. Tell me about some of the other things you've done in the modelling world.
Well, I think my outlandish fashion got me noticed. So I became a brand ambassador for the Australian fashion label Little Party Dress. So I promote all of their clothes, and I'm so grateful to them that they put their clothes on someone like me with a disabled body so that people are actually seeing us, and other people with disabilities can see clothes on somebody sitting down. It's really important. I've just taken a job modelling wheel covers for wheelchairs, which is a bit of a dream come true because wheelchairs were like hospital equipment when I was a kid. I always dreamed of a gorgeous wheelchair, and now I get to model it for fun.
Well, just describe to the listeners what it is. When you say a wheel cover, what does that mean?
And so it's like a cover that goes across your tyre, but it's in beautiful bright patterns and colours that can just make it look amazing. It's basically like I suppose a hubcap on a car.
Yeah, so it's not just the hubcap; it's the part that covers the spokes, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah.
yes. Yeah.
And who was the people that have? Is this the first time you've had something like this?
Yes, this is the brand. Colour My Wheels. Yeah, they're an Australian brand.
Right.
Actually, Queensland. Yeah.
Right. So you're an influencer, is that what you're saying?
I know, yes. I do laugh when people call me an influencer because I suppose I am.
Do you have an Instagram account?
Yes, I
things
do.
Like that? And you do your fashion, or is it really the whole package sort of thing?
Oh, I do the whole package. You might get a recipe, you might get a political lecture, you might get my boots, my kids. Someone said to me the other day, "You've got everything on your account. It's like a one-stop shop."
But that might be the way to go. Where did you get your love of fashion from, do you think?
Oh, look, I think, my nan was an impeccably dressed woman. She's definitely my fashion idol. I used to take her shoes and her jewellery when I was little and put them on and parade around the house.
Yeah.
And so I think she played a big role.
Yeah.
But I also think that awakening of becoming my own self and getting that confidence, I started to love fashion more then. Before that, I was a bit more self-conscious, a bit more worried about my body, a bit more shy about being in a wheelchair. And I think once I got confidence, then the fashion just became a part of that, and it let me have joy in my identity. So fashion, people think fashion's frivolous, but actually it's very important.
And is it mostly bright colours, or what's your kind of, what do you love?
I do like a little bit of classic clothing. I do like that Audrey Hepburn, a little bit of a chic look, a bit like what you're wearing today. I always love your little neckties and scarves. Beautiful.
They serve a purpose, Alyce. It's covering up old crepey skin, I can tell you, yeah. So no, we're not talking about my fashion, we're talking about your fashion. With being in a wheelchair, is there, you said before about you can see someone sitting down wearing the fashion of, what's it called? My little party dress.
Yeah.
So they advertise with people sitting down in a wheelchair and
Yes,
things, yeah.
yes.
And is there anything else that needs to be adapted? Does it need, their jackets need to be longer, or are they specific clothing, or not really?
They're not a solely accessible brand. They just promote people with. We have Michelle who uses a rollator, one of the walkers. I'm in a chair so that people can see how their clothes look. And we choose ones that are more accessible, that have like elastication or easy for people to get on and off. But there are brands that are adaptable clothes. So have Velcro, have longer, easy to open buttons, magnets, things like that. We are getting that sort of fashion. But my fashion choices are a bit limited because I just simply can't wear everything in a wheelchair. Sometimes when you sit down, an outfit just doesn't look so good.
Yeah, and I mean, is it... I heard, doing research for this interview, I heard you say something about a doctor or someone said to you, you just have to wear clothes that your carer can get on and off.
Yes, that's very much the attitude. That we should just dress how it's easy for everybody else. And it's like that, what does that say? That we're a burden to other people, that we should only do things that are easy for other people. So I've never prescribed to that, I'm afraid. I will shove myself into a pair of jeans or hop around to get a pair of boots on.
We have to suffer for our art, Alyce. We do need to. Tell me about going swimming. Do you go swimming?
I used to. I'm afraid it's just a little bit too tricky for me these days. I can't regulate my temperature. So when I swim in a pool, I get a bit too cold. But when I was younger, I didn't notice as much.
Yeah.
But swimming's very freeing. It's a very freeing experience, and I really enjoy a bit of hydrotherapy. But we need a nice hot pool.
I did, just when you were talking about wearing clothes, and I thought, and being self-conscious about your body, and the most self-conscious I suppose most people feel is when they're swimming and wearing togs. So did you feel like that? And yeah,
very much.
Are there wheelchairs? I know one time when Mum was in a wheelchair, we were up at Noosa and there was a wheelchair that you could take into the ocean. Have you had experience with that sort of thing?
Yes, we actually went up to Noosa when they rolled out the first beach mat, and I took my power chair down the beach mat with my kids to the sand. And it was just a magnificent experience. But I have been in a beach wheelchair once, and we went into the water, and it was pretty incredible. Yeah.
It has to be a hot day, I think, because when that water hits you, it's pretty shocking, isn't it? Now, you mentioned your children, Alyce. Mm-hmm. You have an incredible story to tell about having your daughter, but you have 3 children, and I understand that 2 of your children are foster children. Tell me about making the decision to foster children.
Well, I always wanted to be a parent. I didn't know how that was going to happen. I was told from a very young age that it would be very risky for me to carry a pregnancy, and that it probably would be unsuccessful. So to think about your options. And so, I always kind of resigned myself that I wouldn't have children, but I knew deep down I wanted to. And so when the opportunity came up to foster a child, I dove in head first because I thought how beautiful I could give this young person a home, and give them the love that they deserve. And so it was a very easy decision for me, and thinking that they would be, our forever children, which they are. And then to go and as soon as we have them, and you hear this from so many people, you go and adopt or foster a child, and then suddenly you're pregnant.
That's right. So I did hear too you say that it wasn't exactly a planned pregnancy.
No.
But how common is it for people with your condition to have children?
Well, not very common at all. But for once, I'm not the first. Yes, I didn't have to be the trailblazer this time. There's a gorgeous lady in the UK. Her name's Fiona Anderson. I met her through my advocacy. She does a lot with the foundation in the UK that looks after my disability. She has 2 kids, 2 little girls, and so she'd had them, and she was the first in the world, and so I'm the second.
You're the second person in the world to have a child.
Yes.
Oh, Alyce. Tell me about going to the doctor when you said, I think I'm pregnant. Like, how did that all sort of pan out?
This is quite hilarious. I was 31, and my aunt and my nan went through early menopause. So I went to the doctor not thinking for a second that I was pregnant. And I said, having trouble with my, And he said, okay, it's probably just early menopause. Let's do a test. We'll just check you're not pregnant, but I doubt you are. Well, oh my goodness. We did the test. And I don't know if I was more shocked or the doctor was more shocked. I think it was very mutual shock. And we were pregnant with Alexander.
And how did you go carrying the pregnancy? Like, were there complications, or is that just a stereotype to say that there would be complications?
It's so funny. Everyone was just catastrophizing. Everyone just thought that I'd have this horrendous pregnancy. I had a dream pregnancy. I didn't even get morning sickness. I was comfortable the whole time. It was just when I got to about 28, 29 weeks, and they said this would happen. Because I'm so small and sitting that I would run out of room. She'd start to push up into my lungs, which can happen to a petite woman or a short woman anyway. And they said once I started to get a bit laborious with my breathing that I'd have to have a C-section. So at 30 weeks, that's what we did. And but up till then, I carried her just fine, which is an absolute miracle.
And will you go back for more, do you think?
No. As much as I'd love to have more, I definitely don't want to repeat the experience. Not because it's not worth it, but to have a knockout C-section, everything's got to be controlled. Everything's got to be safe for me. I had to go to ICU afterwards. It was quite a big recovery. And then my daughter did a 10-week stint in the NICU because babies born that early, even though they have a really good odds, they still can't, their lungs and their stomach are the last thing to form. And so they need that time to basically finish developing. So that was a very long journey for us. So not entirely keen to do it again.
And you've got a family of 3, so I'm not sure that you really want to either. I mean, that's an incredible thing. Your wonderful partner Brendan dropped you here.
Yes.
Can I just ask you about that and how that works with your partner? I mean, I want to be that person who I want to be on that show. You can't possibly ask that or whatever it is. Yeah.
No, feel free.
Yeah.
I had no idea that Brendan was going to fall in love with me.
How did you meet?
We actually met through my brother. So he has bragging rights that he got to set us up, basically. We started out as good friends, and then he asked me on a date. That was that. I can't believe it. He's a really great guy, and his thought was, I'll look after you to the extent that you want me to. So he was very respectful about what do you want me to help you with, what don't you want help with, and he was very confident that he could just help me do things. So but he let me have it at my pace and have those boundaries and but these days, as you saw, he just barreled me up your front step and chucked the wheelchair up there and see you later, love.
See you later, love. Yes. Yeah. That's right. And is it that asking for help, how do you go? You just strike me as such an independent woman. How does that sometimes you just don't have any choice, or how do people get to that point where you have to ask for help and not feel resentful about it and stuff?
Yeah, I'm very stubborn and independent, so it takes me a lot of swallowing my pride to ask for help, and I often don't let people into that inner circle because I don't ever want to be somebody else's burden, and I know that's ridiculous because no one on this earth is totally independent. we all need help with something, you know. But yeah, I've had to learn that it's okay and that we are a community and we can all be there for each other. I'm there for people and people are there for me. And so I've had to let those walls down a little bit and let people in.
And you and Brendan are engaged?
Yes, we are.
Is there any immediate plans to get married, or we're just too busy with all the work and all the kids and all the, you know, having our wheelchair stolen?
Every time we think we might, the joke is someone's going to get married, we're going to have another child, there'll be another political race, something will get in the way. But the plan is there, yes. Sometimes. Yeah.
Has Brendan, from his family, they were totally accepting about having a partner with a disability?
Yeah.
He's never been sort of scorned by his grandmother saying, you know... I mean, all those things are true, that people, particularly sometimes in the insensitivity of people who don't know you.
Yeah. Look, we're very lucky. Brendan's family's great. But you're right, so many families aren't accepting. Brendan's dad did say, you know, it is a big commitment, you know, making sure that Brendan was aware that, you know, it's something that you have to take seriously. I guess because we were young, you know, but they've all been wonderful. But Brendan's mother was actually in a wheelchair. She had brain cancer and passed away, and so their experience of disability was related to illness, but she used a wheelchair for the last couple of years of her life. So they'd had that experience of disability that way. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, as per usual, unfortunately, I've run out of time, and I did give you the heads up on my 2 questions that I like to ask people. One of them is, the first one is, I don't know that you'd be a fan of the royals, although you probably love the fashion.
Yes.
Unlike myself, who doesn't spend all my time scrolling on Instagram. If I was to ask you, Alyce, who your favourite royal is, what would your answer be?
I reckon you can probably guess this, but Princess Diana.
Diana. Tell me about your love of Diana.
I think that she was warm and she was a humanitarian and she committed her life to helping the most vulnerable in the community, and I really admire that. But she also pulled off killer looks, you know, her fashion and her work with the bigger fashion houses, you know. She's just the ultimate.
And she is unlike and that's why I love this question, because it reveals so much about the person who people nominate. And even though you're wearing the Diana drop pearl earrings today,
yes.
What's your favourite Diana look? Was it when she had the short hair and the strapless dress in the black and white photos? Or
yes, that era.
Yeah, she
Diana
sort of really
finally
found her confidence, didn't she?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Her becoming her true, authentic, strong, beautiful self, not in the shadow of a man. You know, I'm very much for that era, Diana.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What's the song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
I had a good think about this one, actually. I'm a bit doing the 90s nostalgia at the moment. I think old school, like Spice Girls or Blink-182, you know, the songs of my youth. I'm getting to that age. I'm really enjoying dancing to that.
Yeah. And tell me about dancing in a wheelchair.
Oh, I always have. I never thought of it as odd. You know, I always went off to the school social, the school disco, and when coming of age, I went clubbing in Toowoomba and danced around all the nightclubs. I really enjoy it.
Is it... How do you get on when you're down here and they're all up there and everyone's sort of talking and yelling and were they even wheelchair accessible, those nightclubs?
Oh, not back when I was clubbing all the time, no. But thankfully they would make little makeshift ramps, but it's quite funny. The bouncers would all just grab me and hoik me up the stairs, you know. I remember Trevor used to have one of the nightclubs. His boys had to carry me down the stairs one night when the elevator broke, you know. I've had some wild times.
So you've literally been on the dance floor, carving up the dance floor.
Yeah.
And do you find that people are quite accepting, and they'd sort of be, you know, jigging away and then bump into you, oh, sorry, love? Or, they were happy to have you there and weren't patting you on the head in any... No.
Thank goodness. Nightclubs seem to be a good leveller. Most people are there to just have a good time.
Yeah.
And so they just get down and have a bit of a dance and then wander off. So, you know, all fun.
Oh, Alyce, I can see you on the dance floor with that disco ball going around. I can, and having a good time, because you are such an inspiration. And I hope there's people out there who've heard this interview, and whether it's in their family or people that they know, and feel inspired by your chutzpah and determination. So, thank you so much for being my guest on Big Little Small Talk.
Oh, thanks for having me, Megan. It's always a pleasure with you.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.